Since the fall of Saddam Hussein in 2003, the regional and foreign diplomacy of Iraq has evolved significantly. An insular, post-Saddam, post-war Iraq has emerged as a country with significant clout, re-establishing positive relations with its Gulf neighbors, and recent visits to Saudi Arabia and Iran, and soon to the US, demonstrates its importance in regional and international affairs. We spoke to Dr. Fuad Hussein, Iraq's Foreign Affairs Minister, on the challenges facing Iraq today. On the topic of Iraq's relations with Iran, much has already been said. The Iranian officials refer to Iraq as a brotherly nation, while Americans speak of Iran's malign activities in Iraq and the region. How would you describe it?
If you are talking about the relationship between Iran and Iraq, first, we are neighbors. And that means we have got geographic relationship, historical relationship, culture, and of course economic also. But this must be based all on mutual interest and on respect for both sides and not intervening in internal affairs of each other. That's our policy.
Well, in fact, 3 weeks ago, on an official visit to Tehran, you called for balanced ties with neighboring countries on the basis of Iraq's interest and non-interference in internal affairs. Now, American media saw this as an attempt by your government to distance itself from Tehran. Is this accurate?
Balancing ties, it means that the decision process in Iraq must be in the hands of the Iraqis. And the Iraqis, they must decide about their country. The intervening of other countries, including neighboring countries, is not accepted.
On the 20th of July, you will be traveling with the Prime Minister to Washington, D.C. for the second round of U.S.-Iraq strategic partnership talks. What do you hope to achieve from that meeting?
The first phase of dialogue between Baghdad and Washington started already a few weeks ago, and this will be the second one, the second meeting in Washington itself. So we have got two targets to go to Washington. One which has to do with the continuing the dialogue with Washington about restarting, reforming, reshaping the relationship between Iraq and the United States. The second target is actually the Prime Minister is leading a delegation to visit Washington and to have talks with President Trump and other officials in Washington, once again about bilateral relationship, but also about regional and international politics.
On the American presence in Iraq, how necessary is a continued U.S. troop presence in Iraq? And do you feel that the Americans are playing a constructive role in Iraq?
We have got the decision of the Iraqi parliament, which demands to withdraw of all forces from Iraq. But at the same time, we have got intensive and wide and strong relationship with the United States. So any step that we are taking, or they will take, it must be a common step. So that's why we are going to Washington to discuss these matters, and there will be negotiation or dialogue about this. So we hope that we will reach a common understanding and it will be in the interest of both countries.
Now, there is a concern that any confrontation between Iran and the US would affect Iraq, would either take place in Iraq or would generally affect Iraq. Have you made this clear to the Americans and the Iranians?
One of the points which we are focusing on is that to avoid any conflict which has to do with other countries and to be solved on the soil of Iraq. That's valid for United States and Iran, but it's valid also for Turkey and their opposition. So Iraq is not the place to solve the conflicts of the other. We want to avoid that. That's first. Second, we want to have good relationship with all these countries. So we are trying to make it clear that we are not going to be part of this conflict, but we hope that they will solve their problem. Some issues which can be considered for other countries as a foreign policy issue, but for Iraq it is an internal issue. the conflict between Washington and Tehran, it is an internal issue in Iraq. So it is very sensitive. That's why we are going to try to explain this to our American friends, as we did to explain it for our Iranian neighbor.
Since 2003, we have seen Iraq evolve from a post-war society to a significant player on the regional landscape. Can you tell us what Iraq's foreign policy priorities are, and is it possible to maintain relations with neighbors, good relations, balanced relations with neighbors that are essentially at odds with each other?
One of the problems that this neighborhood or the neighboring countries of Iraq, they are in conflict with each other. And because of the current situation in Iraq, of course, some of them, they are trying to solve their problem inside Iraq, to export their problem, which has to do with each other, and to solve it inside Iraq, a kind of proxy political war inside Iraq, and that's very dangerous. So we are making it clear. First, we are going to follow the policy of balancing link with all these neighbors. And balancing that means that we are going to have the decision related to Iraqi politics, Iraqi economy, Iraqi society. This must be clear. Second, we want to have good relationship with all neighboring countries. So good relationship with all neighboring countries, that doesn't mean we are choosing one to be against the other. So our priority in the first place is to establish a normal relationship between Iraq as a country and the other countries. And of course, the second priority is to have good relation with outside world. All this, the target is to have stability inside Iraq, but also to have stability in the region, because without stability in the region, there will not be stability inside Iraq. But the equation is right. If we would say no stability inside Iraq, there will not be stability in the region, but also to rebuild Iraq, to rebuild our economy, to have a better life, to have security inside the country and with the neighboring countries. So these are our priorities and our targets in our foreign policy.
To what extent is the instability in Syria affecting Iraq?
The instability in Syria affected in Iraq. In the first place, when ISIS started, ISIS didn't recognize the borders. ISIS terrorist organizations, they were active in both countries, and they were crossing the border. And
have you managed to control the borders now?
In the first place, ISIS state collapsed, so that made it easier with the support of course, of many countries. ISIS state collapsed in Iraq, but that doesn't mean ISIS terrorist organization doesn't exist. At the same time, we have got also ISIS terrorist organizations, the same organization in Syria. So we know there are contacts between these two organizations. Anyhow, it is important for us to control, and we are trying to control the border with Syria so that we can limit the activities of ISIS inside Iraq. However, I may recognize that ISIS gradually is coming back as a terrorist organization, although it's not comparable with the period of 2014 and 2015.
Now, Iraq is holding several thousand ISIS prisoners and their families. Are you satisfied with the efforts of home countries to accept them? These are non-Iraqi.
Most of them, they are in Syria, those prisoners. So they are in Syria, but half of them, they are Iraqis. And of course, there are many foreigners. We are negotiating with many countries how to deal with this issue. It is a very sensitive, difficult, dangerous issue, to be honest. But we are in intensive contacts with various countries, European countries. Some of them, they came from Europe. Some of them, they came from other Arab countries. But we are trying to solve this issue in a way that will secure the situation in Iraq, but also in Syria.
Iraq is home to more than 260,000 Syrian refugees. Much like Turkey, Iraq should be complimented for its humanitarian efforts, which have come at great financial cost. Do you see these refugees returning to Syria anytime soon?
These refugees, they came to Iraq, and especially to Iraqi Kurdistan in 2011. And since then, they are here. And it is unfortunate, except some NGOs which helped these refugees. No country supported the refugees and the local government or regional government in Kurdistan. So indeed, you are right. These refugees in the first place, they need help, they need support. And we are trying to bring that issue also on the table with European countries and other countries as they are helping the neighboring countries, and they are helping the refugees from Syria in the neighboring countries. So it is supposed to help also Iraq and the refugees here. We hope that they will go back one day, because at the end, their country is in Syria. But that depends on the situation in Syria. There isn't, not yet, stability in Syria, and the conflict is continuing, the fight is continuing, we understand that it will be difficult for those refugees to go back. So until then, I think they will stay in Iraq.
Iraq is China's fourth largest oil supplier and has a significant presence in other commercial and defense activities. At the same time, many countries have regretted their commercial relations with China. Do you think it's possible to balance good diplomatic relations with good commercial relations?
Yes, that's possible. That's possible. You see, for us, China is an important partner. And indeed, China is one of those countries which are importing Iraqi oil. So, and we have got a good relationship, especially commercial relationship with China. And the Chinese and Iraqi diplomatic link is going back for a while. So this is not new. And we, as I said, our policy is to have good link and relations with all countries, including these big economic power, and China is an economic power.
On the issue of the rift between some Gulf countries, how has Iraq managed to navigate that?
You see, we are not intervening in internal affairs or bilateral relationship between other countries. That is their own business, their own policy. We here in Baghdad, we have got good relation with all Arab countries, Gulf countries, all of them. And we are communicating, we have got trade relationship, and of course, most of them, they are members of OPEC organization, and we are member of OPEC, and we are an oil country. So it is important for us to discuss different kinds of policies, including oil policy. But it is important for us also to have a good relationship with Gulf countries so that we can gradually, step by step, increase the stability in the region. So our relation is good with all of them.
Thank you for your time, Dr. Fuad Hussein.
Thank you very much.